Rain hammered against the tall glass walls of the mansion on Queen Anne Hill, as if someone outside were begging to be let in. The sound rolled through the empty corridors like a warning echoing off marble floors and stainless steel railings until it finally reached the man who almost never slept. Elias Hartman stood alone in his office, staring at the glow of code on a curved screen, while the storm raged behind him. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost dressed in a tailored shirt, with sleeves rolled up, jaw-tight, eyes hollow from years of insomnia and silence. He had lived in this enormous house for 5 years, but had never once filled it with warmth or conversation or company. It had always been only him and the rain. He was ready to shut down the system for the night when a sound slid through the floorboards. It was faint enough that someone else might have ignored it, but Elias had spent years listening for the smallest noises. It was not the clink of a glass, not a door, not the hum of a machine. It was a sound that made him stop breathing for a moment. A low, broken moan. He froze. It came again. Sharp, weak, painful. He was already moving before he even understood why. His steps echoed down the steel staircase, every muscle tight with something he had not felt in years. Maybe concern, maybe instinct, maybe dread. The sound guided him to the great room below, lit only by the storm outside. He turned the corner and stopped so suddenly that the breath left his chest. Lena Reyes, the new maid who had started barely a week ago, was sitting on the polished wood floor near the base of the stairs. Her hair hung in wet strands around her face. Her uniform was rumpled, and her hands were pressed against her side as if she were trying to hold herself together. Her breathing came in short, shaky bursts. Her shoulders trembled. Her legs were folded beneath her as if she had collapsed trying to stand. Elias had never seen her look anything other than quiet and almost invisible during her shifts. But now she looked like someone trying not to fall apart. He stepped closer and knelt just enough to reach her arm. She flinched at his touch, and he felt the tiniest tremor travel through her skin. When he tried to help her up, she gasped in panic and whispered words that hit him like the storm itself. "Go slow, it hurts." For 10 full seconds, Elias did not move. The world felt like it had narrowed to the shape of her voice. A fragile breath, a plea. He drew his hand back, slightly shocked by the way the words landed inside him, the way they echoed with memories he never spoke about. She was not looking at him. She was staring at the floor with wide, glassy eyes, like she expected him to lash out. He did not. Instead, he spoke softly, more softly than he had spoken to anyone in years, asking what happened and whether she could stand. Lena shook her head, and her fingers tightened around the fabric at her waist. Something in the way she held herself made him lean forward, not out of curiosity, out of fear, not for him, for her. Her jacket had slipped slightly off her shoulder, and when he reached to lift it gently away, he saw the truth that froze every thought in his mind. Bruising, deep dark purple fading into yellow. Not new, not fresh, not accidental. Injuries that had not been treated. Injuries someone had tried very hard to hide. He lifted the edge of the cloth a little more and saw another mark on her ribs, older, but still swollen. His jaw tightened until it hurt. Her breathing hitched as if she expected him to get angry at her. She whispered again, softer this time, the same words shaped by fear rather than pain. "Go slow. It hurts." Elias understood now. She was not scared of falling. She was scared of him. Or rather, of what men had done to her before. He pulled his hand away immediately and sat back on his heels, giving her space so she could breathe without shrinking. But inside him, something fierce began to rise, something he thought had died the day the helicopter crashed and left him with scars the world could not see. He had seen fear before. He had lived with it, carried it, inhaled it in nightmares and daylight for years. But seeing it on her face stirred something in him that felt dangerously close to rage. Who hurt you, he wanted to ask, but the words would have broken her. So he kept his voice low and steady as he tried again to understand what she needed. She whispered that she was fine and that she just moved too fast going down the steps. A lie, a thin, trembling lie. Elias was a man who built global systems by recognizing patterns, and here the pattern was obvious. This girl was hiding something, something pressing, something dangerous, something that made her shrink from every touch and swallow every truth. The storm cracked open above them with a burst of white light, as if punctuating the realization. Lena winced at the sound, and Elias saw her grip her side again. She was hurt far worse than she wanted anyone to know. Hurt enough that walking had become a risk. Hurt enough that she could not hide the pain anymore. She tried to stand and nearly collapsed forward. Elias caught her without touching her injured side, lifting her only by the arms, slow and careful and deliberate. Her breath shuddered, and she whispered the phrase he would remember long after tonight. Go slow, please. And he did. He lowered his voice to a whisper and told her that he would not rush her, that he would not touch her without warning, that he would not let her fall. She blinked up at him for the first time, and he saw something break in her eyes. Not fear, not pain, something else, recognition maybe, that he was not the man she thought he might be. But the marks on her body told a different story, a past heavy enough to drag her down at every step. Elias steadied her and guided her toward the nearest sofa, moving as if he were carrying glass. Her knees buckled again, and he kept her from hitting the floor, his voice steady, while asking if she could breathe and whether she needed a doctor. Lena shook her head violently, as if the idea terrified her. He wanted to push, but the terror in her eyes stopped him. Whatever she was running from was real. He knew that now. As he helped her sit, the rain grew louder, almost violent, turning the world outside into streaks of silver. She lifted her hand from her ribs for a moment, and he saw the bruise again. And in that moment, Elias Hartman understood something with complete clarity. She was not moaning because of him. She was not scared of what he might do. She was hurt because someone else had already done it. Badly. And she was trying to survive the aftermath alone. He stared at her for a long, quiet moment, something sharp forming in his chest. She was hiding from someone, and whatever she was running from was not finished with her. Not yet. He realized then that this night was only the beginning. The storm outside didn't calm, but inside the mansion, the world narrowed into a tense stillness that felt almost unreal. Elias Hartman stood a few feet away from Lena as she tried to steady her breathing. He had seen injuries before, had seen data on thousands of accidents, had even experienced his own catastrophic impact when the helicopter went down in Idaho 5 years earlier. But none of that prepared him for the quiet way Lena tried to hide her pain, the way she forced her back straight and pressed her palms into her thighs, like she was bracing against some unseen wave. When she whispered that she did not need a doctor, her voice was too thin to be convincing. Her eyes flicked toward the door, as if expecting someone far more terrifying than a physician to walk through it. Elias had built empires on recognizing red flags, and there were too many in front of him. He straightened and pulled his phone from his pocket, intending to call the on-call concierge physician. His company kept on retainer. Lena flinched violently at the mere sight of the screen lighting up. "Please, no doctors," she whispered, the words breaking like they were being forced through years of fear. Elias froze. She was not hiding from medical care. She was hiding from what medical care might reveal. As a CEO, he had learned to handle crises like algorithms. Identify, analyze, solve. But this was not a system error or a malfunctioning prototype. This was a young woman shaking on his sofa, praying he would not involve anyone else. Logic told him the right move was to insist on help, but something older than logic whispered that if he pushed too hard now, she would shut down completely. He lowered the phone. "Let me just look at the injury," he said quietly. She shook her head, gripping the edge of the sofa. "I will not touch you," he added quickly. "Just let me see the swelling so I know you can breathe." She hesitated for a long moment, then slowly loosened her grip. Her shirt rode up just slightly as she adjusted, and the bruises became clearer. Elias inhaled sharply. He had lived through trauma. He had spent nights shaking alone, too. But even he had never seen bruises shaped like that. They were not random. They were not the chaotic marks of a fall. They were fingerprints, human hands, violent hands. Rage pressed against his ribs before he could stop it. He forced himself to exhale slowly, because the sound of anger might send her spiraling. She was already trembling, as if expecting him to explode. He softened his voice. "Lena, who hurt you?" The question was simple. The answer was not. She twisted her fingers together until her knuckles turned white. "Nobody. I just fell." Elias stared at her with the same intensity he used when debugging impossible code. She was a terrible liar, but the kind of terrible liar who had been trained by fear, not dishonesty. He rose and moved toward the smart wall panel, keeping his steps slow so she could track every movement. With a swipe, he dimmed the harsh ceiling lights and replaced them with warm amber glows along the perimeter. The atmosphere softened. The shadows shrank back. Lena blinked as if the change alone eased her pain. He had not realized how bright the house always was until he saw her relief. She looked at him with surprise, maybe even gratitude, and he felt something unfamiliar shift in his chest. He sat across from her now instead of towering over her. People scare people less when they sit lower. He remembered his therapist saying years ago. He had ignored the advice then. Now he used it. "Tell me what you need," he said. She pulled her jacket around her like protection. "I just need to work. I am fine." "Later you can work," he said. "Right now you are hurt." Her eyes darted toward the floor. "I cannot take time off. I need this job." The desperation in her voice cut deeper than any data chart. He studied her for a long, quiet moment, wondering what kind of life forced a young woman to choose pain over rest. He knew what desperation felt like. He had lived through it when the helicopter blades stopped turning and the ground swallowed everything but his heartbeat. He had sworn he would never let another person get close enough to need him. Yet here she was, small, hurt, terrified. And he could not disconnect from this situation the way he disconnected from people. His gaze drifted to the security console. He had built an AI system that could detect intruders within half a millimeter of movement. He had built drones that could map danger faster than human reflexes. He had created robots used in emergency rescues. But he had never learned the algorithm for human pain. "Let me call Dr. Patel," he said gently. "She will not ask questions you do not want to answer. She is discreet. She has treated me before." Lena shook her head, eyes filling with panic. "If a doctor reports this, I will lose everything." Elias felt confusion flicker through him. Why would she be the one punished for being hurt? He leaned forward slightly. "Who are you afraid we'll find out?" She swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed painfully. "I just need to heal on my own. Please, do not make any calls." He wanted to argue, but her eyes were full of silent agony. She had known men who used force disguised as kindness. He would not be one of them. "Fine. No doctors tonight," he said finally. Her shoulders sagged in relief. "But you need to drink water, and you need to eat something." She looked startled. "I am not hungry." He did not push. When a person had lived with fear long enough, hunger became secondary to survival. He stood slowly and moved to the kitchen. Through the reflection in the glass wall, he saw her watching his every movement with guarded eyes, ready to flinch at any sudden gesture. He opened a drawer quietly and grabbed a blanket. When he returned, she stiffened, expecting pain. Instead, he draped the blanket near her but did not touch her. She blinked, surprised again. Her breathing eased. He sat across from her once more. "You can rest here tonight," he said softly. "This house is secure. No one can get in without 30 layers of clearance." She nodded slowly, but her hands still shook. His voice softened even more. "You are safe here, a lie perhaps." Safety was not just walls and systems, it was trust, and trust took time she clearly had never been given. She lowered her gaze. "I am sorry," she whispered suddenly. "Sorry, why?" "I am causing trouble. I was supposed to clean the lower hall tonight." I slowed everything down. Elias stared at her. That was the moment he understood just how deeply wired her fear was. "You are not trouble," he said firmly. "You are a person, and you are hurt." She looked up at him with confusion, as if no one had ever said those words to her. He felt something inside him tilt. For years he had believed he was not built for connection. That trauma had rewired him too thoroughly. Yet now he found himself wanting to protect someone he barely knew. Not because she needed him, but because she deserved protection, and someone had taken that from her a long time ago. He watched her fight to stay awake through pain and exhaustion. Eventually her eyes closed for a moment, and her head dipped forward. "Lena," he said softly, "you should lie down." She jerked awake with a gasp. "No, if I sleep, I will slow you down." Elias exhaled slowly. "Lena, there is no system to maintain, no quota, no deadline. This is a house, not a factory." Her eyes filled with something that looked like disbelief, mixed with shame, as if she had never been allowed to rest without punishment. He stood again, moving quietly, so she would not flinch. "I will set up the guest room downstairs," he said. "You do not have to move far." Her voice cracked. "Why are you being kind? Because someone should be." The rain softened outside as if in agreement, and Elias Hartman, the billionaire who had shut the world out for half a decade, realized that something fragile and unseen had shifted between them. He had found a problem he could not code his way out of. A life bruised at the hands of someone else. A girl too scared to speak the truth. And a storm outside that somehow sounded quieter than the storm inside him. Lena Reyes had always been good at disappearing. It was a skill she learned long before she knew how to fold hospital corners or carry a tray. without making a sound. Growing up in a cramped apartment above a liquor store in Tacoma, silence had been her safest language. Her father drank more than he worked. Her mother coughed more than she slept, and she learned early that the less space she took up, the fewer bruises she collected. When her mother died 2 years ago, the world shifted under her feet, but not in the liberating way she imagined freedom might feel. Her father spiraled deeper into the bottle, and her younger brother Mateo was taken into foster care after neighbors reported yelling one too many times. That memory still lived in her bones, the sound of Mateo crying as the caseworker pulled him away, promising it was temporary, that families could be healed, that everything would be okay. It was never okay. The system moved slowly, and every time Lena asked about getting him back, the answer was the same. Hire a lawyer, prove stability, provide a safe home. 3 requirements she could not meet with the wages from a coffee shop and 2 cleaning shifts a week. She pushed herself harder, working until her fingers cracked from bleach and her vision blurred from exhaustion. She told herself the bruises from slipping in the supply room or bumping into counters were nothing. But not all bruises came from accidents. Some came from the man she made the mistake of trusting for a brief moment of companionship. Kyle Mercer had walked into her life like a solution offering rides, warm dinners, promises of help. He knew exactly how to speak to a girl who had never been protected, and then when she was too tired to fight back, he changed. The first shove felt like a joke. The first threat sounded like a warning meant for her own good. By the time she realized what he truly was, it was too late. He controlled her phone, he tracked her location, he knew where she worked, and he liked to remind her that she had no money or family left to save her. She tried to leave once. He dragged her back by the arm and left a bruise shaped like his hand. She left a second time. That time he left bruises shaped like fingers around her ribs, the same bruises now hidden beneath her uniform. She escaped to Seattle with 2 changes of clothes, $60, and a printed job listing for a housekeeping position in a mansion she did not believe she would get. But she did get it. Or maybe the world finally gave her one small mercy. It did not feel like mercy now as she sat wrapped in a blanket on a billionaire's sofa, shaking not from cold but from the fear that her past had followed her here too. Elias moved quietly around the living room as he prepared the guest room, and Lena watched him with uneasy eyes. She had never worked in a place like this. She had never met a man who moved with such precision, like every step had a purpose. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his voice carried a calm weight, controlled and low. He looked like someone carved from marble by a sculptor who favored sharp edges. And yet, when he softened the lights earlier, when he said she was safe, when he promised no doctors, no pressure, no touch, something in her had shaken loose. She did not trust him. Trust was a luxury, but she no longer felt the immediate urge to run. That alone frightened her. When he returned, she straightened instinctively. She was used to being corrected, ordered, yelled at. Elias simply stopped in front of her and crouched down again, keeping his hands visible and far from her body. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, even though her ribs screamed. He offered his forearm instead of his hands. She hesitated, then looped her fingers around the sleeve and slowly rose to her feet. Her breath hitched. He matched her pace without a hint of impatience. The hallway was long and dim, lit by soft amber lights, and lined with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the storm-drenched city. Some part of Lena marveled at the view. She had never seen Seattle from this angle. Always from sidewalks, bus stops, diner windows, never from above the skyline. Each step hurt, but the pain was quieter than before. Maybe because she was no longer carrying her fear alone. Elias guided her to the guest room and stopped at the threshold. He flipped a switch, and warm light filled the room. The bed looked impossibly soft, like it belonged in a magazine instead of reality. "You can rest here tonight," he said softly. "I will stay downstairs if you need anything." She blinked at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you are hurt. People help hurt people." She lowered her gaze. "Not the people I knew." Elias's jaw clenched, not in anger toward her, but toward whoever taught her that. "I do not know your past," he said gently, "but I am not part of it." She nodded faintly and moved inside. When she tried to take off her jacket, she winced. Elias turned away, giving her privacy, but he heard the short, sharp breath she tried to hide. He walked into the hallway to get her a bottle of water, then paused when he saw her reflection in the mirror across the room. She was studying her bruised ribs with an expression he recognized too well. Shame. People like him carried their wounds in their minds. People like her carried them on their skin. He returned and placed the water on the dresser. "You should sleep," he said. She nodded again but did not lie down. Instead, she spoke so quietly, he almost missed it. "I did not fall." He turned slowly. She kept her eyes on the floor. "I know," he said. The silence stretched until her breath shook. "I cannot talk about it. Not yet." "I will not ask," Elias replied. "But if someone hurt you, then you are not safe out there alone." She swallowed hard. "I cannot go home. He is watching it." Elias felt a dark, cold pressure settle under his ribs. "Someone is looking for you." Her fingers twisted into the blanket. "Yes." He took a breath steady and controlled. "Then you stay here tonight." She hesitated. "I do not want to be a problem." "You are not a problem. You are someone who needs a safe place. That is all." Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his for a brief moment. In that moment, he saw something beneath the fear. A spark of resilience. Something left unbroken. She whispered, "Thank you." Elias nodded once. She climbed into the bed cautiously, as if expecting the mattress to collapse. He stepped back toward the door. "If you need anything," he said softly, "knock or call out." She nodded slightly. He left the door cracked open in case she panicked in the dark. He walked back into the hallway, then into the living room, but something felt different. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress around him. It felt heavy with responsibility. He looked toward the stairs and imagined the sound of her moan echoing again. Go slow. It hurts. What had she survived? What had she run from? And why had the thought of someone hurting her stirred an anger in him he had not felt since the crash? In the quiet, storm-lit room, he realized something he had not expected. He wanted to protect her, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because for the first time in years, someone else's pain moved him. Lena Reyes had secrets in her eyes, and Elias Hartman was beginning to feel the weight of them settle into his bones. The next morning arrived without sunlight. Seattle often woke under a gray blanket, but this morning the clouds hung so low they seemed ready to press against the glass walls of the mansion. Elias stood in the kitchen, holding a mug of black coffee. He barely tasted his thoughts drifting back to the night before. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bruises again. Saw Lena flinch at the slightest movement. saw fear carved into her posture like it had lived there for years. Normally, he spent mornings reading market reports or debugging prototypes before the day officially began, but his focus broke every few minutes as he glanced toward the hallway that led to the guest room. At 7:30, he heard soft footsteps, hesitant and uneven. He looked up. Lena appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple, oversized sweater and leggings from the emergency clothing closet he kept for staff who forgot uniforms. Her hair was loosely tied, and her eyes carried the heavy fog of someone who had slept too lightly after too many nightmares. When she realized he was looking at her, she froze like she had been caught doing something wrong. "You are awake," he said quietly, setting his cup down. She nodded immediately, straightening her posture as if preparing for inspection. "I can start working," she whispered. "I can clean the kitchen or the lower hall. I am fine today." Elias shook his head. "You need to rest." Her throat tightened. "If I do not work, I do not get paid." "You will get paid regardless," he said without hesitation. Her eyes widened with confusion, as if that concept simply did not exist in her world. "I cannot take money without earning it," she whispered. "Then earn it by healing," he replied. That startled her enough that she blinked. He moved slowly, always slowly now, toward the counter and gestured to a chair. "Sit." She hesitated, but eventually walked toward the dining nook. When she eased herself into the chair, he noticed the tiny flinch as her ribs pressed against the backrest. She tried to hide it by adjusting her sweater. He pretended not to see. He poured warm water into a mug and brought it over, keeping a careful distance, for pain and nausea, he said softly. She stared at it for a moment before wrapping both hands around it, like she needed the warmth. "Thank you." He returned to the counter, giving her space, and began preparing something simple. Toast, eggs, fruit. He was not much of a cook, but he understood the science of nutrition and the fact that her body needed fuel to heal. When he placed the plate in front of her, she looked at it as if it were a gift she was not allowed to accept. "You do not have to," he began. "I know," she said quickly. "It is just that no one has ever." She trailed off. He waited. She did not finish the sentence. That was becoming their pattern now. Lena spoke in fragments, and Elias listened for the rest in her silence. She ate slowly, wincing every few bites. When she lifted her arm too high, her breath caught. He noticed everything without commenting. She was a person who needed her dignity, not pity. When she finished, she stood abruptly, as if instinct told her she must repay him immediately. "I can wash the dishes," she said. Elias stepped back, palms visible, making no move to stop her. "If you want to," he said calmly, "but only the ones you can do without pain." She looked confused again, then nodded slowly. She moved to the sink and began washing with careful, measured motions. The water ran. The storm echoed against the glass, and for the first time since she arrived, the mansion felt less like a cold museum and more like a place where someone actually lived. Over the next hour, a quiet rhythm formed between them. Elias worked at the kitchen island, answering emails in rapid bursts of typing, then glancing up to check on her without making it obvious. Lena cleaned surfaces within her ability, taking breaks. She tried to hide, but not well enough. At one point, she reached for a high shelf and gasped. Elias immediately stood. "Do not stretch like that." She lowered her arm quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry." "Do not apologize for pain," he said firmly. She nodded, but her eyes flickered with something deeper. She was not used to any man adjusting his behavior around her comfort. She did not know how to receive it. Around midday, he noticed her pace slowing. Her shoulders slumped. Her steps became uneven. "You should sit," he said. "I am okay. That is not what your body is saying." She stiffened, caught. He softened his tone. "Sit. You will work better later if you rest now." That seemed to make sense to her. She slipped onto a stool and folded her hands tightly. Elias returned to his laptop, but found himself typing slower, aware of her presence, in a way that felt strangely grounding. For years, the house had been silent except for machines and rain. Now the faint sound of Lena breathing shifting occasionally. Clearing her throat filled the emptiness like a soft undercurrent. Around 2 in the afternoon, she finally spoke again. "Why did you hire me?" Elias glanced up. He had not expected the question. "Your references were good," he said simply. "That is all." She stared at him. "People like you do not hire people like me." "What does that mean?" Her voice lowered. "I have no degree and no money, no one to call if something happens to me. People see that. They treat me like." She did not finish. He closed his laptop. "Lena, I hired you because I needed help. You were qualified. That is the end of the story." She searched his eyes, trying to find something she could doubt. When she found nothing, she nodded faintly. Later, when she tried to stand and nearly lost her balance, he instinctively reached toward her. She flinched hard, raising an arm defensively, before realizing he was not going to touch her. He froze immediately and lowered his hand. "I am sorry," she breathed. "I am not used to." Elias shook his head gently. "Never apologize for protecting yourself." Her eyes glistened. A small tremor ran through her fingers. After a pause, she whispered, "You are different." He did not know how to respond to that. He simply guided her with verbal cues instead of touch. "Step back, hold the counter, breathe." When she finally stabilized, she whispered a soft thank you and retreated to fold towels in the laundry room. He watched her go with a mixture of admiration and concern. Every movement she made was deliberate, restrained, shaped by the memory of violence. The way she shut doors quietly, the way she hugged objects to her chest, the way she stood near exits. She had built her life around escaping danger, and yet she was trying so hard to work as if nothing was wrong. Elias had not expected anything to change between them. He simply wanted her safe. But by late afternoon, he felt something shift in the air, like a new rhythm settling into place. A quiet routine, soft lights, slow steps, post-it notes she left on the counter that read "laundry done," or vacuumed stairs in small, neat handwriting. It was not romance. It was not intimacy. It was something gentler, a fragile coexistence between two people who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen without fear. As evening fell and the storm began again, Lena carried a basket past him, moving slower than before. When she reached the base of the stairs, she paused, one hand gripping the railing. Her breath caught. Elias stood immediately. "Do not go up. It is too steep for your ribs." She looked over her shoulder, startled by how quickly he reacted. "I can manage," she insisted quietly. "You do not have to. Let me." She hesitated, then nodded once, small and trembling. He climbed the steps first, then guided her from above with patient verbal cues. "One step at a time. Tell me if it hurts." Her voice was barely audible when she whispered, "Go slow. Please." And for reasons he could not explain, Elias felt those words settle into him the same way they had the night before. Not as a warning, not as fear, but as trust, trying to form in the cracks of her pain. "I am going slow," he murmured back. "Just breathe." When she finally reached the top, She looked at him with something like relief, something like gratitude, something painfully human. For the first time since she arrived, she held his gaze for more than a second. And she did not look away in fear. She looked away in something else entirely. Something warm, something aching, something that would change everything. Night pressed against the mansion, like a living thing, heavy and watchful. Rain streaked the glass walls in silver ribbons, turning the house into a dim aquarium of quiet shadows and soft echoes. Elias Hartman had spent years in this kind of silence, but tonight it felt different. The air carried an uneasy thrum, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. He had finished his final video call of the evening when he noticed the absence, the small sounds Lena usually made as she moved around the house, the soft clinking of dishes, the faint hum of the laundry room. The shuffle of her careful steps had gone silent. He listened for a moment. Nothing. Not even her breathing from the hallway. He stood from his desk, instinct tightening his chest. Lena had told him she was starting to feel better earlier, but he had watched her wince through an entire afternoon of work. Pain did not disappear just because someone refused to acknowledge it. He walked toward the kitchen, first moving deliberately so she would not be startled if she was nearby. The lights were dimmed to the soft, warm glow she preferred, but the room was empty. No dishes drying on the rack, no mug of tea cooling on the counter, no Lena. His pulse ticked up. He checked the living room next. Empty. He checked the laundry hallway. Empty. By the time he reached the base of the stairs, he felt a cold edge scrape across his ribs. Something was wrong. He climbed the stairs faster than he meant to, steps sharp against the polished wood. When he reached the landing, the dim golden light from the guest room spilled into the hallway. His breath steadied, but only for a moment. The bed was empty. The blankets were half pulled back, as if she had tried to lie down and changed her mind. On the floor near the dresser was a small brown medicine bottle. Not his, not something he kept in the house. He walked toward it and picked it up. Generic painkillers, a cheap brand, half empty. The label was worn from being handled too often. He was still holding it when he heard the sound, a soft thud, a faint gasp, and then a silence so tight it felt like panic. Elias dropped the bottle and followed the sound into the ensuite bathroom. The light was off. He flipped the switch. What he saw made the breath slam out of him. Lena was collapsed on the cold tile floor, slumped sideways with her back against the cabinet. Her head was bowed. Her hands were clutching her shirt, fingers trembling. Her skin looked too pale. Her breathing came in shallow, desperate pulls. And her ribs, the bruises that had once looked dark purple, now carried an angry red swelling around them. Elias crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt beside her, but he did not touch her. Not yet. Lena, can you hear me? She tried to lift her head. Her voice was barely audible. I am sorry. I did not want to bother you. His chest tightened with something sharp and furious. You are not bothering me, he said firmly. Tell me where it hurts. Her fingers moved weakly toward her ribs. The bruising had worsened in a way he had never seen from a simple fall. Something was wrong, something deep. He tried again. Did you hit something? A step? A door? Did you slip? Her breath hitched. Not tonight, she whispered. Before. The world narrowed. He moved to lift her shirt slightly, slowly making sure she could see every motion before he made it. Lena, if you need me to stop, tell me. She nodded, trusting him. When he peeled back the fabric just enough to see the injury clearly, Everything inside him imploded. It was far worse than he imagined. The bruises were layered old injuries that had not healed before new ones were added. Some were the shape of knuckles, some the shape of hands gripping hard, and the deepest ones were swollen, edged with discoloration that screamed infection. Lena. Elias forced the words out quietly. How long have these been like this? Her eyes filled with tears that did not fall. A while, they hurt less when I keep them wrapped. He clenched his jaw. Did you treat them? With what? A pharmacy kit, she breathed. Alcohol, bandages. That was not treatment, that was survival. He swallowed the rising anger, the kind that came from knowing someone had done this to her over and over again. Lena, you need a doctor, he said carefully. Her head jerked. No, Elias, please, no hospitals, no police, no questions. He wanted to argue. He wanted to shake her and tell her this was too dangerous. But her eyes were wide with terror, not stubbornness. She was not afraid of medicine. She was afraid of being found. He softened his voice. Then we bring the doctor here. Someone I trust. Someone who will not report anything without your consent. She shook her head harder, wincing at the pain. If he finds out I told anyone. If he thinks I am talking to someone. If he knows where I am. Her voice broke into sobs she tried to swallow. Elias felt something inside him fracture. He could not fix this with code. He could not patch this with logic. He could only be human, which was the one thing he had never learned to do well. He reached out slowly and placed his hand near her arm, but not touching. I am not going to let anyone hurt you. She closed her eyes as if the words struck something deep. He waited until she opened them again. I need to see all the injuries. If something is broken, we cannot risk ignoring it. She hesitated for a long, painful moment before nodding. Her hands moved shakily to lift her sweater. She stopped halfway, unable to finish. Elias completed the motion, gently, carefully revealing everything. And he froze. Her ribs were a map of violence, bruises old and new, finger marks, impact lines swelling along the lower rib that looked dangerously close to a fracture. He felt nausea rise not from the sight of injury, but from the knowledge that someone had done this with intent. Someone had used her body like a surface to express rage. His voice came out too quiet. Who did this? Her lips trembled. I cannot say. He will come for me. Elias felt something cold and dangerous wash through him. Then let him come, he said softly. He will not get past me. Her eyes widened. No, if he sees you, he will hurt you too. Elias leaned closer, not touching but steadying her with his presence. I am not afraid of him. You should be, she whispered. He is not like you. Elias felt the air shift around them. The rain outside hit harder, echoing the pressure inside the room. Lena's breath trembled as she looked at him, with eyes stripped bare of every defense. I did not want you to see this. I did not want you to think I am weak. Elias inhaled sharply. You are not weak. You are surviving. There is a difference. The tears finally fell, one, then another. She buried her face in her hands and let herself sob quietly, as if she had practiced crying without making noise. Elias reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. He placed 2 fingers lightly under her chin, lifting her face just enough for her to meet his eyes. You do not have to hide anymore, he said. Not from me, not from anyone. She whispered, barely audible. Why are you being so kind? Because someone was not, he answered. Her breath shook again. The storm outside cracked with lightning, illuminating the room and the truth between them. Elias Hartman had seen hundreds of injuries, thousands of problems, millions of lines of broken code. But nothing had prepared him for Lena Reyes's truth. And nothing had prepared him for the fierce, undeniable need to protect her. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a human being, someone finally seeing her pain and refusing to look away. The storm eased into a steady drizzle by dawn, but the mansion felt unnervingly still. Elias had barely stepped away from Lena's side all night. She slept in short, jagged breaths, twitching every time thunder cracked or the house settled. The infection worried him. The swelling worried him more. But what haunted him was the quiet terror in her voice when she whispered about the man who had done this. Whoever he was, whatever he had carved himself into her fear, so deeply that even safety felt dangerous. Elias stood in the hallway, outside the guest room, with his tablet pretending to scan through work emails while listening for her breathing. He could not focus on anything, not market trends, not prototype revisions, not meetings scheduled with board members. Every few minutes he returned to the doorway to check on her again. Each time he saw her shift in pain, something inside him twisted violently. Around 8:30, just as he started considering calling Dr. Patel, despite her protests, his phone vibrated with a notification from the AI security system he had installed throughout the property. Facial recognition alert. Unknown male, front perimeter. Elias's blood turned cold. An alert like that did not appear unless someone came within 10 feet of the security boundary. He tapped the screen. The camera feed blinked into view. Through the blur of drizzle and distorted reflections from the glass gates, a man stood outside the property line. Tall, broad-shouldered, hood pulled low, hands in pockets. He wasn't pacing, he wasn't unsure. He was standing still, staring directly at the mansion. Elias zoomed in. The man lifted his head just enough for his face to catch the camera angle. Hardened jaw, cold smile, eyes like someone who enjoyed being feared. Elias did not know him, but he understood exactly what kind of man stood there. A predator waiting for permission to pounce. He felt something dark coil through his chest. The man pulled out a phone, lifted it briefly, and snapped a picture of the mansion. Then another. Then he walked away, with deliberate calm, as if letting Elias know he would be back. Elias closed the feed and set the tablet down slowly. His pulse beat hard against his throat. He walked back to the guest room and found Lena awake, propped weakly against the pillows, her hands trembling as she tried to sit up straighter. He controlled his voice, even though adrenaline roared through him. Someone was outside the gate. Her face drained instantly. Who? I do not know, he said carefully. But he was not lost. Lena sucked in a breath that hurt her ribs. Her fingers clutched the blanket until her knuckles turned white. He found me, she whispered. Elias approached slowly, keeping distance so she would not feel trapped. You do not know that. She shook her head violently. He is watching the house. He is waiting for me to come out. Elias forced his own panic into stillness. The last thing she needed was his fear piling on top of hers. Do you have his number? Lena looked away. He blocked me, but he can message from new numbers. Elias felt anger burn low in his stomach. A man who stalked and hunted his victim did not block her out of spite. He blocked her to keep her powerless. Tell me his name, he said quietly. Her breath trembled. I cannot. If someone says his name, he will know. He always knows. Elias stared at her. The paranoia was not irrational. It was survival logic etched into trauma. He crouched at eye level, keeping his body open and non-threatening. Lena, listen to me. You are not leaving this house today, or tomorrow, or any time he is out there. You are safe here. She shook her head. No one is safe around him. He will hurt you. Elias almost laughed, not out of humor, but out of disbelief. The idea that this man could harm him was absurd, but he swallowed the reaction because to Lena, Kyle Mercer was not just a person. He was a monster, shaped from every violent memory she carried. He took a breath and spoke with a steadiness he did not entirely feel. I am not leaving you alone, not for a second. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting panic. You do not understand. He sent pictures of the apartment when I left. He knew where I slept. He knew where I worked. He knew what bus I took home. He always finds me. Elias reached out slowly and rested his hand near hers without touching. Then let him try to find you here. Her eyes snapped open. That is what I am afraid of. Elias leaned closer. This house is not like the places you lived before. I designed the security myself. No one gets in without being shredded by alarms before they even touch the doors. She swallowed hard, shaking. Why is he here? Why now? Elias hesitated. Because you are no longer where he controls you. Her breath hitched. And because I left him, she whispered. Elias felt rage tighten his fists. Did he ever face consequences? Did anyone stop him? No, he has friends. He has money. He knows people. Elias went very still, a dangerous kind of still. Why does he want you back? Her voice shook as she whispered, because he thinks he owns me. Elias inhaled sharply. His voice dropped to a low, controlled promise. He owns nothing. Lena's eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. He thinks I will come home if he scares me enough. He thinks he can drag me back. He thinks I cannot survive without him. Elias shook his head. You are not going back. Not now, not ever. Her lips trembled. You do not know what he is capable of. Elias spoke with quiet certainty. I do not care what he is capable of. I know what I am capable of. Before either of them could say more, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lena flinched so hard, she gasped in pain. Elias picked it up before she could. The number was unregistered. The message preview showed one line, nice house. The bottom dropped out of Lena's world. She covered her mouth, shaking violently. Elias felt something primal ignite behind his ribs. This was not coincidence. This was stalking. This was escalation. This was a man announcing he was close. Elias deleted the message immediately. Lena's breaths came in fast, painful gasps. He found me. He found me. Elias took a slow step forward. Lena, look at me. She forced her eyes up. He will not touch you. She shook her head. You cannot promise that. He can get to anyone. Elias's voice turned steel. He will not get to you. He will not get past me. Lena swallowed tears, welling again. You do not know how dangerous he is. Elias held her gaze without blinking. And he does not know how dangerous I am when someone hurts what I protect. She froze. The room vibrated with a fragile electric silence. She whispered, What are you going to do? Elias answered with quiet finality. Whatever it takes to keep you safe. The rain outside fell harder, like a warning or a countdown. Somewhere in the city, a man who believed he owned her was waiting. And inside the glass mansion on the hill, a billionaire who had never cared about anyone was becoming the one person she could no longer hide from. The man she feared had returned, but she was not alone anymore. The day dragged on beneath a sky, the color of steel, the kind of heavy Seattle gray that pressed low over the city and made every breath feel colder. Lena stayed mostly in the guest room, curled beneath the blanket, her eyes drifting constantly toward the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Elias kept watch from the hallway, pacing slow, silent circles, while processing the security feeds on his tablet. Every time he checked on her, she tried to sit up straighter, tried to look less afraid, tried to pretend she was not unraveling under the weight of the threat outside. But he saw the truth in the tremble of her fingers and the way she flinched at the sound of distant car engines. When afternoon faded into evening, he approached her room again, tapping lightly on the half-open door so she would not startle. She looked up from the blanket she had been twisting in her hands. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is he gone?" "Yes," Elias said gently. "No sign since the morning." She nodded but did not relax. Fear was a habit carved into her bones. Elias stepped inside but stayed near the door. "Tell me what you need." She stared at the blanket. "I do not want to be alone," she whispered, and the admission seemed to break something inside her. He did not move for a moment, not out of hesitation, but out of the careful understanding that every step toward her had to be measured like approaching a wounded animal who had been taught that touch meant pain. "You will not be alone," he said softly. "I will stay nearby. If you want silence, I can give you silence. If you want company, I can stay in the room. You decide." Lena lifted her eyes slowly. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve safety," Elias answered simply. "And because I understand what fear does to a person." She blinked with confusion and curiosity. "What do you mean?" Elias exhaled. He had spent years burying the past so deeply it felt like another lifetime. But looking at her now, the memories rose like old ghosts. 5 years ago, the helicopter crash changed everything he said quietly. "My co-founder died on impact. I survived, but not completely." Lena's eyes softened. "What happened to you? I could not sleep. I could not be around people. I could not breathe without hearing blades and metal snapping apart." He paused. "And every time someone tried to help me, I pushed them away. I thought isolation was safer than vulnerability." Lena swallowed. "That is how I lived too." "Until you got hurt," he finished. She nodded. Pain became normal. Silence became normal. Fear became normal. Until I did not know how to speak up anymore. Elias moved one step closer, then another, letting her watch each one. He sat carefully at the foot of the bed, leaving enough space between them that she would not feel cornered. "You do not owe me your past," he said softly. "But I want you to know something. You do not have to protect me from your truth." She looked at him with wide, fragile eyes. "If I say everything out loud, it becomes real again. It will hurt." He nodded. "Then we go slow." Her breath caught the same way it had the night she said the words first. Go slow. Elias held her gaze. "I will not ask more than you are ready to give. Ever." She stared at him for a long moment, searching for something she clearly did not expect to find. Trust, safety, patience. Then she spoke so quietly he almost missed it. "He used to tell me that no one else would ever care what happened to me." Elias' jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "He lied." She blinked quickly, caught off guard by the firmness in his tone. "Why would you care? You barely know me." Elias looked down at his hands for a moment, gathering the right words. "I am not good at people," he admitted, "or relationships, or letting anyone close. But when you walked into this house last week, something changed. I noticed the way you avoided noise, the way you stayed small, the way you apologized for breathing too loudly." "That means you noticed me," Lena whispered. Most people do not. I noticed you before you ever spoke, he said, because I used to move the same way. She inhaled shakily. Did anyone help you when you were like that? A few people tried, he said. I did not let them. It took me years to trust again. I am still learning. So if you do not trust me yet, that is something I understand. She stared at him with a softness that made his chest tighten. Why are you telling me this? Because you are carrying too much weight alone, and sharing even a piece of it might make it lighter. Lena touched her side gently, where the bruises throbbed beneath the fabric. The pain makes it hard to think, hard to breathe, hard to remember. I am not there anymore. You are not there, Elias said. You are here with me, and I will not let anything or anyone hurt you again. She blinked back tears. What if he comes inside? He will not get past the first layer of security. What if he tries to break in? He will fail. What if he hurts you? He will not. She swallowed. You cannot guarantee that. Elias met her eyes with unshakable calm. I survived a helicopter falling from the sky. I will survive a coward who hurts women. Lena's lips parted slightly in surprise. Her shoulders trembled, but for the first time not from fear. Something else flickered in her eyes, something like belief. She shifted slightly, wincing as pain flared. Elias leaned forward. Do you need help lying down? She hesitated, then whispered, Yes, but please go slow. He nodded once. Always. He moved carefully, guiding her with verbal cues instead of touch. Lift your arm a little. Shift your weight to the left. Breathe. She followed each instruction, trusting his voice even as her body protested. When she finally settled against the pillows, she exhaled in relief. Elias stood to leave, but her fingers brushed the blanket, as if reaching for something she was afraid to ask for. Stay, she whispered. Not next to me, just stay where I can see you. Elias felt something warm spread through his chest. Of course. He dragged the armchair closer, positioning it where she could see him clearly. She relaxed her eyes, softening for the first time since the morning. Elias leaned back in the chair, watching her breathing even out. Watching the fear loosen its grip on her features. Minutes passed, then an hour. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The silence between them was no longer empty. It felt like the beginning of something delicate and quietly monumental. Elias Hartman, the man who had built walls around himself higher than his glass mansion, finally let someone into the quiet spaces he had guarded for years. And Lena Reyes, the woman who had been taught that vulnerability was a weakness, finally found someone she could be vulnerable with. As she drifted into sleep, she whispered one last thought, barely perceptible, but clear enough for him to hear. I do not hurt when you are here. And Elias, who had never believed he could be anyone's comfort, felt something inside him begin to heal too. Night fell with a heavy stillness that felt wrong, the kind of quiet that sinks into the walls before something shatters it. The rain had stopped hours ago, which somehow made the silence worse. Elias sat in the armchair beside Lena's bed, the dim glow from the hallway spilling across her sleeping form. She looked fragile under the blankets, her breathing soft but uneven. Each time she shifted in pain, he felt a pull in his chest, as if her ribs were his own. He had promised himself he would stay awake all night to watch over her, but the exhaustion from sleepless days and wired adrenaline pressed behind his eyes. Around 2 a.m, he leaned his head back for a moment. Just a moment. He did not remember falling asleep, but he remembered waking. A sharp metallic click snapped through the house, like a bone fracturing in the dark. Elias jerked awake, every sense igniting at once. He rose silently from the chair, spine rigid, breath locked in his throat. Another sound followed. The faint creak of a door hinge near the back of the house. The security system had not triggered, which meant the intruder knew how to bypass it. Or they had found a blind spot. Or worse, they had hacked the system from outside. He turned toward Lena, who was still asleep, oblivious to the danger creeping through the mansion, like a shadow with intent. Elias moved to the hallway and listened. No rain, no wind, no hum from the appliances. Nothing except a single soft footstep on the lower floor. Slow, heavy, deliberate. He felt something cold flicker through his veins, fear but not for himself. He rushed back into the room and woke Lena with a hand hovering near her shoulder so he did not startle her violently. "Lena, wake up, now." Her eyes snapped open instantly, wide and terrified. "Is he here?" Elias lowered his voice to a whisper. "Someone is inside. Stay in bed. Do not move." Her trembling hands clutched the blanket. Elias stepped back, closing the door almost completely, but leaving a thin gap so he could hear her if she panicked. The hallway was dark, too dark. The motion-sensitive lights did not turn on. Someone had disabled them. He moved quietly down the stairs, heart pounding with a precision that felt almost mechanical. His old survival instincts flared to life. Instincts he thought had vanished with the crash. Another footstep, this one closer. In the reflection of the glass railing, Elias saw a silhouette moving through the kitchen. Broad shoulders, hood pulled down, slow, confident steps. He recognized the posture from the security footage. Kyle Mercer, the man who had hurt her, the man who had stalked her, the man who thought fear was a leash. Elias's jaw tightened until it ached. Kyle moved toward the main hallway, scanning the layout as if searching for a familiar shape. When he spoke, his voice echoed low and smug through the dark. "Lena, I know you are here. My sweet, you cannot hide from me." Elias felt a surge of rage, not hot, not wild, cold, focused, controlled. He stepped from the shadow as Kyle turned. They locked eyes for the first time. Kyle smirked. "You must be the billionaire, the one she thinks can protect her." Elias kept his voice even. "Leave, now." Kyle laughed quietly, like someone amused by a pet trying to bare its teeth. "She belongs to me," he said, "and you are going to give her back." Elias took a slow step forward. "You will never touch her again. Your choice is to walk away or be dragged out in handcuffs." Kyle's smile twisted. "She tells you things, does she? Lies come easily to her. Pain makes her dramatic." Elias did not move, but his voice lowered into steel. "The bruises on her ribs are not drama." Kyle shrugged casually. "Accidents happen. Sometimes a woman needs a reminder of who is in charge." Elias's hands curled into fists, but he did not strike. He did not need to. He had built this house with layered security, designed to detect threats like him. All he had to do was trap him. Kyle took another step forward, closer now. "Where is she?" Elias did not answer. Kyle's eyes sharpened. He moved toward the staircase. Elias stepped into his path, and Kyle snarled. "Move!" Elias did not move. For a moment they stood in silence, each man testing the other's resolve. Then Kyle lunged. Elias dodged, grabbing the nearest object, a metal lamp from the console table, and slammed it against the floor. The impact triggered the hidden sensor beneath the hardwood panel. Immediately the house responded. Locks snapped shut, barriers sealed, metal shutters slid over the glass walls. The entire mansion locked down like a fortress preparing for siege. Kyle spun around in panic as red security lights pulsed at the edges of the ceiling. "What the hell did you do?" Elias stepped forward, his breath steady. "You walked into a smart home, built by a man who plans for everything." Kyle lunged again, this time swinging wildly. Elias dodged, but Kyle clipped his shoulder, hard enough to send him stumbling. Kyle charged toward the stairs again. And from upstairs, a terrified voice cried out, "Elias!" Kyle looked up. "There you are." He bolted up the stairs 2 steps at a time. Elias pushed through the pain and sprinted after him. Lena had crawled out of bed, trembling so violently she could barely stand. Kyle reached her first, grabbing her wrist and yanking her toward him. She screamed, not a sharp cry, a broken, terrified sound that seemed to rip Elias's soul open. "Let her go." Elias lunged and slammed Kyle into the hallway wall with more force than he thought he still possessed. Kyle staggered. Lena collapsed to the floor, clutching her ribs. Kyle roared in anger and swung at Elias again. Elias ducked, and Kyle's fist crashed into the wall instead. Lena gasped in pain. "Go slow," she whispered through tears. "Go slow, it hurts." Kyle laughed breathlessly. "You hear that? She is mine." Elias's calm shattered. He hit the emergency override panel beside the wall. Sirens blared outside. The internal locks sealed Kyle inside with them. Police called automatically. Kyle tried to run, but the hallway shutters dropped, trapping him. He turned back toward Elias with a snarl. "This is not over." Elias stood between Kyle and Lena, unshakable. "Yes, it is." Within minutes, the police burst through the security entrance Elias remotely opened for them. Kyle fought. He lost. They dragged him away, kicking and spitting threats. When the last officer disappeared and the doors sealed again, the house returned to silence. Elias turned to Lena, who was shaking uncontrollably, tears streaking down her face. He knelt beside her, slowly, gently, voice barely above a whisper. "It is over, Lena. He will not hurt you again." She collapsed into his chest, not in romance but in pure human collapse, the kind that comes when someone has been running for too long and finally stops. And for the first time in 5 years, Elias wrapped his arms around another person. Not out of obligation, not out of logic, out of something real, out of something breaking open inside him and rebuilding itself in the same breath. He held her while she cried and whispered back the only thing she needed to hear. "You are safe now. I swear it." The house stayed locked down long after the police cars disappeared into the wet Seattle night. The metal shutters remained sealed. The alarm system hummed quietly under the floors, and the entire mansion felt like a fortress recovering from battle. Elias kept one arm around Lena until her breathing steadied. Her body shook in small, violent tremors, not from cold, but from the shock of seeing Kyle again, of feeling his hand on her skin, of hearing his voice slice through the silence she had started to trust. Her tears soaked the front of Elias's shirt, and he did not move, did not speak, did not rush her. He simply held her, grounding her with the steadiness of his breathing, till she finally loosened her grip. When she tried to pull away, embarrassment tightening her jaw, Elias gently stopped her. "It is fine," he murmured. "You are allowed to break." She blinked hard, looking away. "I do not want you to see me like this." He shook his head. "This is not weakness. This is what survival looks like when you finally get to breathe." Her lip trembled again, but she swallowed the sob. "I am sorry." "For what?" "For bringing danger into your house, for ruining everything." Elias lifted her chin lightly with one finger, so she had to meet his eyes. You did not ruin anything. He ruined your peace. That is on him, not you. Her breath hitched at the conviction in his voice. Slowly she nodded. He helped her stand, steadying her with verbal cues like before. Lean on the wall, hold the railing, breathe slowly. She followed each instruction, trusting the predictability of his tone. When they reached the guest room, she hesitated at the doorway. The hall where Kyle had grabbed her still pulsed in her memory. Her fingers twitched. Elias spoke softly beside her. He is gone. She exhaled shakily. I know, but her body did not know. Her ribs throbbed. Her knees felt unsteady. Every memory screamed run, even though her mind whispered stay. She stepped inside slowly. The room still carried the faint scent of lavender from the blanket Elias had brought earlier. She sank onto the edge of the bed with a wince. Pain flared through her ribs like fire under her skin. Elias crouched down a few feet away. We need to treat your injuries, he said quietly. You are bleeding through the bandage. She looked down and saw a faint red stain near the hem of her sweater. Her stomach twisted in embarrassment. I should change it. She tried to stand again, but her body refused. He raised a hand gently before she could strain her ribs. No, I will help you. Her eyes widened in panic. Not like that. I cannot, he said softly. I will not touch you without permission. You do it. I will talk you through it. Relief washed through her. She nodded slowly. He handed her a fresh bandage and turned his back to give her privacy. She lifted her shirt inch by inch, gasping as the fabric brushed her swollen skin. She bit down on a whimper and peeled the old bandage away. The smell of dried blood filled the air. Her vision blurred for a moment. Pain made her dizzy. Are you okay? Elias asked without turning. Yes, she lied. He waited. She finished wrapping the new bandage with shaky hands. When she lowered her shirt, she whispered, You can look now. He turned around slowly. The exhaustion on her face made something twist inside him. She looked so young, so hurt, so breakable. He sat in the chair again, watching her carefully. You need rest. She nodded, but did not lie down. Instead, she stared at her hands. I never thought he would find me. Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He tracked you. It is not your fault. She shook her head. You do not understand how men like him work. Elias's voice lowered. No, you do not understand how men like me work. Her eyes flicked up, surprised. Men like him break people. Men like me do not let it happen again. She studied him, trying to interpret the quiet storm behind his eyes. Why are you helping me? Her voice cracked. You owe me nothing. You are not my family. You are not my friend. You are my employer. You should have thrown me out to protect yourself. Elias's jaw clenched. I do not throw out people who are being hunted. She swallowed. But why risk yourself? Why fight for me? Elias took a slow breath. Because for the first time in 5 years, I care what happens to someone. Her lips parted in stunned silence. You care? Yes. She looked down quickly, blinking hard. No one has cared in a long time. He felt the truth in her words. Heavy, raw, breaking. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, fighting a shiver. Elias stood and crossed to the thermostat, lowering the temperature to something warmer. He adjusted the lights, dimming them to the soft amber she liked. And then he walked back slowly, so she saw every step before he took it. I want you to rest, he said. But if you are afraid to sleep alone, I can sit outside the door. Or in the corner. Or wherever you want. Her voice came out fragile. Can you stay? Here, so I can see you. Elias nodded. As long as you need." He dragged the chair closer to her bed, not too close, but close enough that she could see him clearly. She eased onto her side carefully and tucked the blanket up to her chin. The room was quiet for several minutes, the kind of quiet that comes after storms, emotional and real. Then Lena whispered into the dim light, "When he grabbed me, I thought I would die." Elias's breath caught. "Lena, no one will ever lay a hand on you again." She looked at him, her eyes shining with tired disbelief. "How do you know?" "Because I will not allow it." She trembled. "What if he escapes? What if he comes back?" Elias leaned closer, his voice steady and unwavering. "Then he will face me again, and next time he will not walk away." Her breath slowed. The fear in her eyes softened just enough for something else to settle in its place. Hesitant trust. She whispered, "I do not hurt as much when you are here." Elias felt something inside him shift, something he had not felt since before the crash, something he thought he no longer deserved. "Then I will stay," he said. She closed her eyes, not asleep, but surrendering to the safety she had never known. As minutes stretched into an hour, her breathing steadied. Her shoulders loosened. Her body relaxed despite the pain. Elias watched over her like something holy or fragile or both. He did not sleep. He did not move. He did not look away even once. Because in this room, the aftermath of her suffering and the beginning of her healing lived side by side. And because for the first time in a long, lonely life, Elias Hartman felt like he had someone to fight for, someone worth protecting, someone worth staying awake for long after the storm passed. He whispered quietly into the stillness, meant only for her though she was half asleep. "You are safe. You are not alone. Not anymore." Lena Reyes breathed softly and let herself believe it. Even if, just for one night, a year later, the mansion on Queen Anne Hill no longer felt like the cold glass fortress it once was. The rain still came and went with Seattle's unpredictable rhythm, but inside the house, warmth lived in every corner. Soft lights glowed instead of harsh white ones. Houseplants thrived near the windows. A faint scent of coffee and baked bread drifted through the halls each morning, and laughter, gentle, rare, but real laughter, filled the spaces that had once echoed only with silence. Elias had changed in ways that still surprised him. He slept through most nights now. He no longer jolted awake at the creak of floorboards. He no longer felt the crushing pressure in his chest at the thought of being touched. And he had not stepped into a therapy office in almost 6 months, not because he refused to heal, but because he was healing every day in ways he never expected. Today, he stood in the kitchen, watching Lena slice strawberries at the counter. She moved carefully, still a bit guarded with her ribs whenever she twisted, but she no longer winced from old wounds. The bruises had faded months ago. The nightmares came less often. And the way she breathed around him had changed from shallow fear to quiet ease. She wore a soft cardigan and jeans, her favorite simple outfit, that made her look like she belonged here, not as an employee, but as someone who finally had a home. Elias leaned against the counter, his arms folded casually as he watched her work. "You cut them too small," he said in a teasing tone he would never have used a year ago. She glanced up with a mock glare. "I cut them the size you like." "No, you cut them the size you think I would like," he corrected gently, which is not the same thing. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. "Then you slice them." Elias reached for the knife and took her place. She stepped aside but stayed close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. Almost. That word had meant everything to him in the beginning. The careful space, the slow approach, the patience. They still moved like people, aware of each other's boundaries, but now those boundaries came from respect, not fear. When he finished slicing, he handed her the cutting board. She took it and turned toward the sink. Her sleeve slid up slightly, revealing a faint line of pale, healed skin. Not a bruise, just a reminder of what once lived there. Elias stepped behind her slowly so she could sense him before he came close. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. She did not flinch. She leaned into him, a miracle in itself. Elias lowered his voice. "You have not had a nightmare in 3 weeks." She nodded. "I know. Because I am not waiting for footsteps anymore. Because he is gone." Kyle had been sentenced 9 months earlier after a full investigation revealed not only the assault on Lena, but 2 former partners who filed charges once his arrest made headlines. His conviction was long overdue. Lena had testified with Elias, seated behind her in the courtroom. He remembered the tremor in her voice, the way she gripped the edge of the witness stand, the way she refused to look at Kyle even once. When the verdict was read, she cried not from fear but from release. Now she turned to face Elias. He studied her eyes, still bright brown, still cautious, but no longer haunted. She set down the bowl of cut fruit and wiped her hands on a towel. "Mateo is coming over tonight," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "He is bringing his homework." Elias smiled. "They'll probably give him extra credit once they find out who his tutor is." Lena rolled her eyes. "You are not his tutor. He just likes sitting in the office while you work." Elias shrugged. "If he does his homework without complaining, I take that as a win." It had taken 6 months of legal procedures and affidavits, but Mateo had finally been released from foster care into Lena's custody. Until she found her own place, she and her brother lived here. Elias repeatedly told her she did not need to rush out, that she and Mateo had a home here as long as they wanted. She never argued, though she always responded with the same sentence. "One day I will have my own home, but I am not ready to leave yours." He liked that answer more than he allowed himself to admit. They moved through the kitchen together in quiet coordination, washing fruit, boiling water, packing Mateo's lunch for school tomorrow. Simple domestic things that felt almost sacred after everything they had survived. When the kettle whistled, Lena reached for 2 mugs. She poured the hot water and handed him one with chamomile tea, the only kind that helped him sleep. He took it and watched her for a long moment. "You look happy," he said finally. Lena paused. "I am, mostly because I do not hurt anymore." Elias felt warmth spread through his chest, a warmth he still struggled to name. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was small, but for them, small gestures had always meant the most. She looked up at him, eyes softening in that way that made his breath stutter. "You taught me something," she whispered. Elias tilted his head. "What?" "That feeling safe is not the same as feeling owned. That love is not supposed to hurt." Elias's heartbeat slowed, not in fear, but in something deep, steady, certain. "And you taught me something too," he said. "What did I teach you? That I am capable of feeling again." A year ago, he would never have said such a thing. A year ago, he was a man who hid behind glass walls. Now he stepped closer until her hands rested lightly on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat. He let her feel it. She smiled softly. "I did not fix you. No, you did not. You opened something in me that had been closed for too long." That is enough. She exhaled slowly, her eyes glistening not with pain, but with the overwhelming relief of being believed, wanted, valued. Outside, the sky finally broke, and a soft rain began to fall. They turned toward the window, watching droplets race down the glass. The same sound that once signaled loneliness for Elias now meant comfort. The same sound that once triggered fear in Lena now meant peace. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He rested his cheek on top of her hair. She whispered the words that had once belonged to terror, now reborn as something gentle. If anything hurts. Elias tightened his arm around her and finished the sentence softly. Just tell me. She closed her eyes. It doesn't. Not anymore. And as the rain washed the city below them, Elias Hartman realized that the woman who walked into his house with bruises and fear had transformed more than her own life. She had transformed his. Lena Reyes, the maid who thought she was invisible, had taught a billionaire how to feel again. She had taught him how to stay, how to care, how to live, and above all, how to love without hurting, forever this time. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, then your heart felt the same things Elias and Lena felt: the fear, the hope, the slow healing, and the quiet courage it takes to love again after pain. Stories like theirs remind us that healing is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not perfect. It happens in moments small enough to miss unless you are paying attention. If this story touched you even a little, I want to invite you to be part of this storytelling family, right here on this channel. Every time you watch, comment, like, or share, you help keep these stories alive. You help us bring more tales of courage, romance, healing, and second chances to people all around the world. And if you want more stories where love grows slowly, tenderly, and honestly, where characters fight their demons and find light again, then make sure you hit the like button right now. It might seem small, but it truly helps the channel reach new viewers who need this kind of emotional storytelling. And if this is your first time here, I would be honored to have you stay with us. Click subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. We post new emotional romance episodes that blend cinematic tension with deep healing arc stories, made for people who believe in love even when life feels heavy. I also want to hear from you. Yes, you, the person watching, whether you are in your living room, in your car, during a break at work, or curled up in bed with headphones on. I want to know where you are watching from. Our community is filled with viewers from the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, the Philippines, Thailand, South Africa, the UK, Australia, and so many more places. Drop a comment, tell me your city or country, and maybe tell me your favorite moment from the story. Was it the first time Elias carried her in his arms? Was it the night she whispered, "Go slow," and he finally understood her pain? Or was it that final scene in the rain when she said, "It does not hurt anymore"? Your comments help me shape the next story. If there is a trope you want billionaire romance enemies, to lovers slow burn forced proximity, Western romance wounded soldier, single mom runaway bride, or anything at all, let me know. This channel is built on your ideas and your heart. And if you want to go even deeper into this world, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that gentle love still exists, someone who has been hurt, someone who is trying to start over, someone who deserves to know that going slow is still progress. Before you go, take a moment to breathe and ask yourself one thing. Which part of you wants to be healed next? Because the next story might be the one to touch that part. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling this story with me, and thank you for believing in love that heals instead of hurts. I will see you in the next episode, and until then, take care of your heart. It matters more than you know.